Hey, good morning and welcome to the Korea Economic Institute. I'm Scott Snyder, President and CEO of KEI, and we are happy today to host a program on what we call the tariff deal, reciprocity, trade balance, and industry with three excellent specialists. And as everybody knows, there's a lot that has been going on, not only in global trade, but also in U.S.-South Korea trade since what President Trump called Liberation Day, April 2nd. And the main focus since that day has been the application of new tariff rates to global products entering the United States, differentiated by country. Those tariff rates fall into three categories: universal tariffs of 10% on all products entering the United States, country-specific tariffs beyond the universal tariffs that are referred to as reciprocal tariffs, and sectoral tariffs primarily imposed under Section 232 investigations that are intended to protect American industries. And to unpack and explain all these tariffs and the negotiations that have come from those announcements, and also to discuss the rationale provided by the Trump administration for the application of tariffs and prospects for achieving their intended goals, and implications for the U.S.-Korea trade relationship, we have three distinguished panelists who are go-to specialists on these issues. First, on the far end, we have former USTR Wendy Cutler, who negotiated the Chorus FTA way back when and is a go-to person. I was just saying that I can't read an article in the American media on the Trump tariffs without seeing Wendy quoted. We also have in the middle Sarah Ahn, Economic Minister at the Embassy of South Korea here in Washington. And then finally, to my immediate left, we have former Chamber of Commerce, former AmCham Korea Director, and current KEI board member Tammy Overby to walk us through the current state of play. And of course, we had originally thought that we were going to be at the end of the negotiation when we set this up, but it turns out that we're in the middle. And so maybe first, Tammy, can you just kind of bring us up to speed on what has happened since Liberation Day? Today is Bastille Day. I don't know if there's a particular significance in that, but help us to set the scene in terms of where things stand with regards to U.S.-Korea tariffs under the Trump administration.
Well, first, Scott, thank you to KEI and yourself for putting this panel together. It's always an honor to be on the stage with two experts, global giants, Wendy and Sarah. So it's always fun to have my friends here. I think to put this in perspective, we need to remember how we got here and sort of look at the U.S.-Korea relationship. We have, thanks to Wendy and Sarah's previous efforts, we have a comprehensive, high-standard free trade agreement, which means that most of our tariffs are zero, which has been a wonderful thing for the 13 or 14 years the Chorus has been in effect for American companies and for Korean companies. However, now, as we're in this really unusual period of negotiation, Korea doesn't have, they don't have a bunch of tariffs they can suddenly use as leverage with the U.S. to go to zero. So that's kind of an odd position. Also, when President Trump first did his Liberation Day, and he gave all of those countries these high tariffs, South Korea was tariffed at the 25% rate. But immediately after that, the markets tanked, the stock market, the bond market, and then we got this 90-day pause. And during that time, I think we also have to realize or remember that former President Yoon last December declared martial law and then was subsequently impeached. And Korea went through some political turmoil. And on June 3rd, they had an election. President Lee Jae-myung was elected. No transition period. He goes into power on June 4th. Now they have a government. So, April 2nd to then, they didn't even really, they had a caretaker government. So they have, one of his early appointments was another friend of ours, Johan Koo, the trade minister. He and his team have been working very, very hard, pretty much 7 days a week, trying to find a landing zone. So, how we got here, been a lot of bumps in the road. And then Korea is also, the reciprocal tariffs of April 2nd, the 25%, Korea is also significantly impacted by the sectorial tariffs, the 232. Currently, for steel and aluminum, that's 50%. Autos, it's 25%. And Korea is also worried about the current 232 investigations. We've got one on semiconductors. We've got one on pharmaceuticals that also will have an impact on South Korea. And then most recently, President Trump sends out 14 letters. South Korea gets one of those letters. Their rate stays at 25%, and they're given until August 1st. So I saw that letter as an extension. So Korea's got 3 more weeks to try to find a mutually beneficial landing zone. But in the meantime, the U.S. president's been very busy. We saw he gave Brazil tariffs, went from 10% to 50% over a non-trade related issue. He doesn't like how the former president of Brazil is being treated. And then over this weekend, we saw the announcement of the EU and Mexico given 30% tariffs. So there's a lot of the chaos and the unpredictability is increasing. I think both of our governments have agreed on a summit. We don't have a date as far as I'm aware. So yeah, things are moving and moving fast. I'll stop there.
Yeah. So in this environment, I want to ask you, Sarah, what do you think are South Korea's most important priorities in terms of managing the current negotiation?
So following the announcement April 2nd of 25% reciprocal tariffs on Korea and the imposition of Section 232 sectoral tariffs on steel, aluminum, autos, and auto parts, Korea has been engaging in good faith to reach a mutually beneficial agreement with the United States. We have actively pursued ministerial-level negotiations, including engagement with Secretary Besson, Secretary Lutnick, U.S. Treasury. In parallel, we hold 3 rounds of technical discussions at the working level aiming to secure exemptions and reliefs from both reciprocal and sectoral tariffs. Despite our good faith efforts during the 90-day grace period for reciprocal tariffs, which ended July 8th, we were unable to reach an agreement with the U.S. for several reasons. As pointed out by Tammy earlier, due to domestic political circumstances, Korea was an undertaker government until June 3rd, which limited our ability to making binding commitments. The new administration inaugurated on June 4th. Following a special election the previous day, began without a transition period, leaving insufficient time to make meaningful progress in negotiations. Cabinet ministers appointed by newly elected President Lee have yet to be confirmed with confirmation hearing scheduled for this week. And as pointed out by Tammy earlier, Korea's effective tariff rate on U.S. goods is already close to 0 under the Korea-U.S. FTA. Korea is already one of the largest export market for U.S. agricultural energy products, number 1 for U.S. beef, and number 1 for U.S. LNG cumulatively from 2017, and one of the largest importer of the U.S. crude oil as well. Additionally, Korea is the largest greenfield investor in the U.S. last couple of years. These factors make it very difficult for Korea to make further concessions in terms of lowering tariffs, buying more U.S. products, or making additional investments. in the United States. While Korea fully understands President Trump's determination to rebalance bilateral trade with Korea, we believe that addressing non-tariff barriers and fostering cooperation in manufacturing must go in hand. This approach will be essential to reduce trade deficit not only in the short term, but also in a more systematic and sustainable manner over the long time. With this in mind, we intend to accelerate substantive discussions over the next 2 weeks, deadline extended by August 1st, to identify a viable landing zone between Korea and the United States, with the aim of reaching a mutually beneficial agreement that balances and expands our bilateral trade rather than constraining it.
I wonder if you can help put these bilateral negotiations into the broader global context and also tell us a little bit about what you think the Trump administration is trying to accomplish with Korea.
Sure. Well, again, let me just echo what Tammy said. It's really my honor and privilege to be here on the stage with all of you. And thanks to our virtual and in-person audience as well. I know there's a lot of interest in this topic. Before I answer your questions, just a few points I did want to make. Number one, Tammy already alluded to this and Sarah did too. We have an FTA with South Korea under which Korea virtually eliminated all of its tariffs. So in my view, this should be a benefit for Korea going into this period. But in fact, I would argue it's working against Korea because unlike India or Vietnam, for example, who have very high tariffs, they can offer lower tariffs and get credit for them. But for Korea, they just don't have that option. So I put that on the table. Second, what we should keep in mind too is not only focus on what the tariffs will be for imports from Korea, but also keep in mind that Korean companies are all over the world with significant investments in places like Vietnam, China, and India. So those tariff rates are also extremely important for Korean companies and Korean interests going forward. And also just throw out Japan there as well. And I hear this both from my Japanese colleagues and my Korean colleagues. Both of them are very worried that the other will get a better deal. And then they won't be able to go home and explain to their domestic constituents how this happened. So this is really kind of a three-dimensional chess game that's kind of playing out in front of us. And frankly, I'm glad I'm kind of watching it from the outside this time and not actually in the negotiating rooms, because this is quite complex. Now, with respect to the negotiations with Korea, I think we can glean from the Vietnam and the UK deal some themes that will probably also emerge in any deal that's reached with Korea. And that includes some kind of baseline rate. Vietnam's baseline rate is 20%. We'll probably see some kind of transshipment rate, although there are so many questions with respect to how that would be implemented and which products that would apply to. We've also noted that these are largely framework agreements, so they contemplate negotiations going forward even after August 1. Like, not everything is going to be settled. So I would, keep that in mind as we think about what a U.S.-Korea deal could look like. In my view, there are three kind of key sticking points towards a successful conclusion of a deal with Korea by August 1. And I'm going to talk about substantive points, not process points, because I can't even imagine a new administration coming in and having and the clock ticking on how many days they have left to make a trade deal with one of their largest trading partners. So, what are the three sticking points? And these aren't particularly in any order. The first would be non-tariff measures, and even though the FTA did address a lot of onerous non-tariff measures that were of particular concern to the United States, there are measures that have lingered around for a while, but there are also new non-tariff measures that have emerged, particularly in the digital space. And I think you're going to see a lot of pressure from the U.S. on Korea to eliminate discriminatory practices against U.S. companies in the digital space. I also understand that we're trying to seek more access for our beef exports to beef over 30 months. Given that I still have the scars from the last time we tried to open the beef market, I'm not sure that this is something I would be pushing for, but again, I'm not in the room. So that would be number one. Number two, and both Tammy and Sarah alluded to this, it's the 232 tariffs. And I hear this from so many of our trading partners, that even if you're successful in these negotiations and you reach a deal to lower the reciprocal rate, it's very difficult to get the United States right now to give you any shield or any protection from either the existing 232 tariffs on steel, aluminum, auto, and auto parts, but also, and copper now I put in that basket, but also for tariffs that may emerge from these ongoing investigations, including semiconductors. And I would also note that many of these 232s have very broad product scope. So when we talk about semiconductor 232, as far as I know, we're not just talking about the chips, but we're talking about a lot of related electronic products as well. We've seen this now with the steel tariffs and the addition of a lot of derivative products to the that are being assigned the 50% tariff rate, including things like dishwashers and washing machines, areas where Korea is particularly competitive. So the question will be, will the U.S. show any flexibility to Korea in terms of giving them some kind of special treatment with respect to auto parts, steel, and aluminum, but also any consideration of special treatment for the tariffs going forward? To date, this has been the major sticking point with Japan, and frankly has led to a logjam in those negotiations. With the UK, the US did agree to a tariff rate quota on autos, and apparently with the EU right now, we are negotiating on auto, steel, and aluminum. And so, open question in terms of how the US will approach Korea's demands in this area. And the third, and I call this kind of the basket of issues that I think are trying to be hammered out right now, are those related to economic security. And, although we're not going to see the word China anywhere in these agreements, as far as I know, a lot of these are provisions that have been spurred by concerns with Chinese behavior on the economic front. And whether this, regards to requests to more closely align our export controls or to reduce Chinese content in exports from Korea to the U.S., or further screening and disciplining Chinese companies investing in Korea. I think in all of these and maybe other areas that fall under this basket are going to be a bit difficult in the negotiations. And I would just add there the addition to possible lifting of the special treatment that was given to certain Korean semiconductor companies in China with respect to their equipment purchases. So again, these are tough issues that need to be resolved. We do have a good track record with Korea in trade negotiations. It doesn't mean it's an easy track record, but it's one that shows that both sides, at least to date, have found ways to be pragmatic, to be realistic, and to kind of keep in mind how it's in our mutual interest to find common ground in all of these areas.
Well, you've really covered the waterfront, Wendy. I want to follow up with a couple of questions for you and then come back to the other panelists. And the first question I have is, how do you feel as a former trade negotiator about this framework approach versus the task of getting into the weeds and making an agreement and then concluding that? And then I also want to ask you, basically, how much do you think that the market can bear, and how much do you think the U.S.-Korea relationship can bear in terms of the Section 232 tariffs?
So look, with respect to the framework agreements, I think there was really no choice. There's no way you can negotiate detailed trade agreements with 90 countries in 90 days. It's just not humanly possible. People at USTR, they work around the clock. I used to work around the clock, but even with a 20-hour day, there's just so much you can accomplish. And so I think rightfully so, the administration early on, after a few weeks, started talking more about framework agreements. But what that means is that, a lot of people, I think come August 1, this is all going to be behind us and we don't have to deal with this, we can move on. I think that nothing could be further from the truth. There will be follow-on negotiations, and these follow-on negotiations, I'm sure, are going to hit snags as well. That may lead the president to threaten more tariffs. And then you combine that with Section 232 tariffs and other tariff threats on non-trade issues. What I keep saying is I think we're going to be living in a tariff world for the indefinite future. And, again, your other question, how much can the markets bear? How much can the relationship bear? I think they can bear more, but at some point, I think there will be a tipping point.
Let me come back to you, Sarah, because the industrial cooperation aspect of this it seems a distinctive part of the Korean approach. And so I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the important industries and priority issues, especially in the context of the 232, that Korea wants to really focus on.
Okay. Thanks. Korea has recently presented a vision for mutually beneficial the manufacturing renaissance partnership when the Trade Minister Ya was in town last week?
It's all one long week.
Then the U.S. has shown strong interest in Korea-U.S. cooperation in strategic sectors such as shipbuilding and semiconductors. We refer ships and chips. As a long-standing and trusted ally, Korea is uniquely positioned to support the President Trump's vision of revitalizing U.S. manufacturing. With Korea's industrial strength and resilient supply chains, such a partnership would effectively serve both imbalance and expand our bilateral trade. So shipbuilding. The United States views revival of domestic shipbuilding as both an economic and national security priority, as underscored in President Trump's executive order restoring America's maritime dominance. President Trump expressed interest in Korea-U.S. shipbuilding cooperation during his call with former President Yoon last November and again with acting President Han in April. Korean shipbuilders are globally recognized for their capabilities, holding world's second largest production capacity after China, and for their technological excellence, producing 75% of world LNG carriers. Leading companies like Hanwha Ocean and HD Hyundai Heavy Industries already are making investments in the United States, forging partnership with U.S. entities committed to support the revitalization of American shipbuilding. Semiconductors, Korean companies are making significant investment in high-tech sectors aligned with U.S. goals to boost manufacturing competitiveness in the United States, particularly in semiconductors. Example, the Samsung in Texas, SK Hynix in Indiana. So Korea is a trusted ally and strategic partner in strengthening U.S. maritime capabilities and semiconductor ecosystem, contributing to American job creation and advancing the manufacturing renaissance agenda. So we've been putting together possible potential cooperation, collaboration across key sectors, including shipbuilding and semiconductor, automobiles, and EV batteries, and presented as a package to the U.S. negotiators. And then I believe those offers been well received by the U.S. counterparts.
And Tammy, I want to ask you about the trade imbalance, because that is clearly one lens through which President Trump is looking at the relationship. And what do you think are the new markets that South Korea could provide, or other purchases that South Korea could make in what areas to try to address that imbalance?
First, I think we have to acknowledge that South Korea has already been doing what President Trump wants countries to do. As Sarah mentioned, in 2023 and 2024, South Korea was the largest foreign investor in the United States. And it's across the board in key industries and 21st century industries. Korean firms are creating high-paying American jobs. So they're already investing heavily in the U.S. They're also already making major purchases, and they were, again, before Liberation Day. Korean Air Chairman Cho Won-tae announced a $32 billion purchase of Boeing planes with GE engines. We also need to acknowledge that of last year's deficit with the U.S., Korea at $66 billion. And a KIEP study highlighted that a little over half of that deficit is intermediate goods that Korea is exporting to the U.S. To fuel these investments. So from my perspective, again, South Korea is already, even without the gun to their head, and to me, the reciprocal tariffs, the sectorial tariffs, it feels like they've got a gun to their head. They're already doing what President Trump wants them to do. So, what else could they do? Well, can they buy more Boeing planes? Well, maybe they could buy another couple. They're already one of our largest purchasers of agriculture or LNG. So they're already doing that. I guess the only thing I could see that would be a real opportunity for Korea would be to resolve some of these long-standing non-tariff measures. One area, and as both Wendy and Sarah have highlighted, digital. Korea's many major American tech companies, digital services they sell to Korea, cloud, AI, online platform. Amazon Web Services, Google, Meta, all of the Coupang, all of these American firms are very active in Korea. And their services that they sell, those can be another export that could help lower the deficit. But again, I just want Korea to get credit for what they're already doing. I think my biggest question to the Trump administration is, why are we treating all of our trading partners the same? I believe that there are some trading partners with whom we have a comprehensive, high standard free trade agreement, and where we have a country whose companies are already massively investing in the United States, creating these high quality jobs. They are making it in America. Why are we treating them the same as other countries who aren't? I'll stop there.
Okay. So Wendy, I know you're going to have to leave a little bit early, and that was a scheduling error on my part. But before you go, I have really two questions for you. One is, in addition to Trade Minister Yaw, National Security Advisor Lee Sung-nak was also here last week, and President Trump made comments about the defense relationship. And so you mentioned that we're probably going to be in a perpetual trade negotiation for the rest of the administration, but there's also the issue of the defense relationship. And I think that National Security Advisor Lee suggested that maybe the approach should be a package deal that somehow links these two together. Or at least that was my interpretation of what he said. What is your thought about the relationship between the defense side of the negotiation and the trade side of it? And then also, if you could say a little bit more about then transshipment issue that you flagged as a real challenge. If I could draw you out on that a little bit, that would be great.
Sure. So, with respect to the first question, at least my experience tells me that you're better off, at least at the negotiating table, keeping both issues separate, right? It's hard for me to fathom having trade officials and defense officials in the same room and trading off tariffs for airplanes or fighter jets or whatever. And I just think it just complicates things. And it also suggests that, somehow you can trade one off for the other. And so, that's where I come out on that. Now, that said, look, in any trade negotiation with any country I ever negotiated with, you keep the whole context of the relationship in your mind. It's front of mind because if relations aren't going well on, let's say, on the security side, sometimes that spills over to the trade side and vice versa. You also want to really understand where your counterparts are coming from and what types of pressures they are feeling at the negotiating table. So again, I think technically they should be kept separate, but I think it's unrealistic to think that it's all going to be cabined off. And if you're a trade guy, you're not even going to, even look into other aspects of the relationship. On the transshipment question, there's just confusion here, I think, because I would never call the 40% tariffs assigned to Vietnam as transshipping tariffs, right? Because transshipments basically, for me, mean that a company is trying to, go to a third country, do minimal operations, and then try, through fraud to kind of sell the product back to the United States or whatever. So transship products should be policed, monitored, and enforced and not allowed. I think what the administration is trying to get at, though, is having two different tariff rates, one for those products with high value content from the trading partner versus those products from the trading partner, but comprise with a lot of content from others, including China. And so how do you enforce something like this? That would be through rules of origin, which would basically, the two sides would need to negotiate exactly where is that cutoff? When does a Korean or a Vietnamese product no longer qualify for importation into the United States? Now, in the Korea FTA, and someone can correct me because I can't remember in the two negotiations, I don't think this was updated. We had a very low value content requirement for autos at 35%. And that means that in order for a car to qualify for zero tariffs, 35% of that content would have to come from the US or Korea. Was that increased at all? I don't think, yeah. Well, and at that time, it made sense. And frankly, our auto companies were all over us at that point because they wanted a low, given their global operations, they did want a lower value added content. You look at the USMCA, and I'm not saying, they're exactly comparable, but in the USMCA, the tariff value added, I believe, is 75% or what?
It's high, yeah.
Yeah. So very high. And so I think that when we look at rules of origin in the Trump world, they're going to look a lot more like these USMCA rules and a lot less like the initial chorus rules. And then the question will be in enforcing these is how do you deal with, let's just say, Chinese content or content from other foreign, countries of concern. And here you may see a bar, a lid put on the value of content that can come from countries of concern. So let me just give a concrete example. Let's just say we were able to agree with Korea on a 65% value added rule for cars. That means 35% can come from any other trading partner. But what we would ask of that 35%, either none or maybe 10% of that 35% can come from a country of concern like China. I mean, this all needs to be negotiated, but just to give you some kind of sense of where I think we're going in these talks.
I want to come back to Sarah on the transshipment issue, but I wonder if I can take one quick question for Wendy before she has to leave. If anybody has a specific question for Wendy, I want to give the opportunity for that to be asked. Right there in the back. Okay.
Hi, Arias Dare. I'm the Director of Communications here at KEI. Just briefly, are there things that have happened over the last couple of months that give you optimism that a net positive deal can be reached? What are some specific things, maybe statements that have come out of the White House that you're taking as a positive sign, if there are any?
Look, I'm taking heart from the fact that we concluded a deal with Vietnam and we concluded a deal with the UK. I think we're far along with a deal with India. And, when I look back on my career, India was probably one of the most difficult countries to negotiate with. So that would be quite a feat. I also take heart from the fact that the administration seems to be learning from some of the challenges it's facing, including, again, moving from comprehensive deals to framework deals, rolling over some of the deadlines, and I think widening the agenda to include areas of cooperation. I don't know, Tammy, Sarah, would you add anything onto that?
Well, thanks. Please excuse when leaving early, and if I could go to. Yeah, well, no, it's totally my mistake. But I want to ask Sarah to say something about the transshipment issue as well, because Korea actually has a challenge both in terms of content and in terms of production in third countries, right? So I'm curious about how you all are looking at that issue.
So while I cannot speak for the U.S. government, it is clear that the transshipment is one of President Trump's key concerns as it appeared in his announcement and deal with Vietnam, and again in his letter sent out to trading partners last week. So since the implementation of the cross-FTA in 2012, the United States has closely worked to ensure only originating goods benefit from the preferential tariff treatment under cross-FTA, and to prevent fraudulent practices such as illegal transshipment aimed at circumvent U.S. tariffs. Recently, in April, Korea Customs Office established a special investigation unit to monitor transshipment of goods exported to the United States. These efforts reflect our recognition that illegal transshipments could seriously damage the credibility of Korean exporters and trigger stricter regulations on Korean products exported to the United States. TCS also enhanced information sharing and other collaborative measures with their U.S. counterparts, and these enforcement efforts positively received by the U.S. authorities. And so we've been working closely with our U.S. counterparts on preventing illegal transshipments, and we know what we are doing.
Tammy, I want to ask you one last question, then I'm going to open it up to the audience. And I think that we all know that we're expecting that at some point, hopefully soon, President Lee Jae-myung will come to Washington to meet President Trump for the first time. But it presents a dilemma because the meeting would occur presumably either in the context of a looming deadline, or maybe it can be kicked down the road a little bit more, and possibly as a place where an agreement can be consummated. But it's also a first meeting, right? And usually first meetings are not the meetings where you consummate agreements. So I'm curious about what your thoughts are about what the right timing and framing of a first Trump-Lee summit meeting should look like in the context of these negotiations.
That's a really challenging question. President Lee Jae-myung hoped his first meeting would be on the margins of G7. That was one of the primary reasons so early in his administration he left. He went to Canada to be part of that. From my perspective, he had an incredible series of bilateral meetings, but because President Trump decided to leave a day early, he didn't get his Trump meeting. So that was supposed to be the meeting where I thought they would solidify, we've had our first meeting, now let's have a summit. Summits are often events that are useful in bringing decisions up to the top. So action enforcing events. So I think it's very likely, and I think probably both sides want to have this earlier rather than later. But trying to get these things teed up so that you've got enough that you agree on that is, again, mutually beneficial can be challenging. So honestly, I don't know what the date's going to be, but I'm confident that they will meet soon. But hard to say when.
It'll be very interesting. I mean, I guess Prime Minister Keir Starmer visited the White House before Liberation Day, but then he appeared by speakerphone for the announcement of the framework agreement at the Oval Office. So there's a lot of different ways that it can be done.
And again, we're in new territory here. The way the U.S. is doing things now, we can look at the past as, it gives us some guideline and outline, but President Trump is not going to be bound by convention. So anything is possible.
Okay. I want to open it up for questions. We've got one here in the front. Just wait for the microphone and introduce yourself, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Donghyun from Yonhap News Agency from South Korea. I have a question for both. For Tammy, based on the negotiations that the Trump administration has done so far with other countries, such as Vietnam and UK, what kind of lessons could Korea learn from those negotiations? And for 안세령 공사님, Japan and Korea are in a very similar situation. So is there any coordination with the Japanese government to perhaps present a common front, or at least not to stab each other in the back?
For what can Korea learn with the framework deals that we have for the UK and Vietnam? I think they're very instructional on what are the priorities. It was also fascinating to see that both of these I would consider framework light. It looks like maybe 20% has been agreed on, and then the 80% is we agree to keep talking, keep negotiating. Wendy made an incredibly valid point that this is going to be 3.5 years of continual negotiation. Let's not forget that while Chorus was negotiated very quickly, it was done in less than a year because Trade Promotion Authority was expiring. So we have seen deals concluded quickly, but they were only doing with one major country. Trying to do 90, Peter Navarro very carelessly said, there will be 90 deals in 90 days. And we're past 90 days, and we have 2 deals and a ceasefire with China. So I think, and again, I can't emphasize enough that we have a brand new government in Korea that is, the cabinet hasn't even been, fully formed yet. So for them to be as far along and to have presented a plan to the Trump administration, to me, is remarkable. I think, I have high expectations because I know many of the people involved, but they're exceeding even my expectations. So, they're very pragmatic. They're frank about the situation. Again, if I were Korea, I think I would still be focused on why are we negotiating this? We already have a comprehensive high standard agreement. Our tariffs are already almost at zero. Why are, yes, we have a deficit, but I think Korea has a good story to explain. A big chunk of that deficit is because of the massive investments they already have in the U.S. But President Trump is a very untraditional president. He sees things very differently, but he cut a deal with Vietnam. I think many people were surprised by that. So I am cautiously optimistic. We have incredible diplomats on both sides. I met with U.S. Trade Representative Greer when I was in Jeju for APEC, and he seems to understand Korea's situation very well. And I'm hopeful that they can find a sweet spot landing zone that will be win-win for both. Because from my perspective, the worst outcome is for the U.S. to force Korea to take a deal that perhaps is not as good as Japan and then have it blow up in South Korea. We've worked so hard to deepen our relationship. And you look at the polling on the how the U.S. is viewed compared to another neighbor like China. We've made so much progress. I just don't want to see all that lost.
Yes. No, we do not coordinate with Japan in terms of negotiating strategies. The Japanese officials in DC are one of my closest colleagues, and we work closely, but we do not coordinate.
Well, the key there is really, I think, where one stands comparatively,
Exactly.
right, in the context of the negotiations. And so, that's a challenge. Because even though there may not be coordination, there could be some competition, at least behind the scenes, right?
They're both watching each other's negotiation very closely. I get questions from each about the other, as I'm sure Wendy does. But I think both countries also see great benefit in getting fair deals for each. One of the things that's impressed me about Lee Jae-myung is his recognition of the importance of the trilateral Korea, Japan, the U.S. So I'm hopeful that they will find deals for both that don't blow up either relationship. I mean, y'all know the history better than I do, and it wouldn't be hard to cause a problem.
Another question? Yeah. One over here and one over here.
Hi, Neil Sosterberg with KI. Tammy, you mentioned digital trade and market access as one field of improvement from the Korean side. How, given Trump's kind of seemingly strong focus on goods trade, how effective do you think that would be in negotiations, and how do you think that could best be incorporated into the negotiations? And I guess that's a question to both of you. Thank you.
I do think while the president does seem to be sort of focused on old, heavy manufacturing, what we saw with Canada recently over the digital services tax was, I think, also a clear indicator that he cares very much how U.S. tech companies are treated. That's also one of the biggest stumbling blocks with the Europeans, their VAT. So he is very much aware that services are important. And again, I think this is an area of opportunity for our two countries because South Korea is very innovative. Kakao, Naver, Coupang was made in Korea, born in Korea. It's an American company now, but it was made there. And these are three very innovative and advanced online platform companies. So, and then you compare that with the U.S., we've got Google, Meta, Amazon Web Services, Apple, Microsoft. But who doesn't have a lot of innovative digital companies? Europe. When I ask my friends, very few people realize Spotify is European. So they got one. SAS, okay, a little bit. Who else? Their approach to digital services with the Digital Markets Act, frankly, I think has a chilling impact on innovation. And many small and medium-sized companies, both in Korea and the US, they use that digital architecture as a way to access the 50 million consumers in Korea. Not to mention the 50 million consumers who rely on these digital platforms for convenience. So I see an opportunity there.
I just want to add that the promotion, the platform competition promotion bills, the proposed in several ways and at Korean National Assembly recently is not about discriminating against the U.S. company or other foreign companies in the Korean digital market. It's about protecting small and medium enterprises and consumers in the and then fair competition in the online markets in Korea. So, but we do understand the concerns of the U.S. digital companies and the U.S. The Congresses and administrations. So we will make sure there will be the fair opportunities for U.S. digital companies' opinions and perspectives presented to the Korean governments, and while we are considering those legislations.
The one point I would add on to that, while I think many companies would agree, maybe American firms aren't the target, it's the impact that really matters. At the end of the day, if they are caught up, and the Chinese companies, the Temu, the AliExpress, the Xi'an, if they're not captured in this, the impact is the same. So, but I take your point.
There's one over here and then one here.
Hi, Nicholas Hamasevich from the East-West Center. There was talk about how economic negotiators understand the full relationship. And there was some sort of sentiment at times, it seemed that the rest of the relationship, whether it was Korea or other countries, had to wait until the deals were done or these talks were done on economics. Is there concern that kind of continual negotiations will impact the rest of Korea relations? Thank you.
From my perspective, no. I mean, again, we've had a security relationship with Korea for over 70 years that it works very, very well. It's very deep, shoulder to shoulder, kachi kapshida, we go together. So I think there is, the understanding that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And again, what President Trump has thrown into all of this is sort of a new way of looking at everything. He starts with the deficits, and he also starts with his preconception that everyone is treating us unfairly. So, but can we still work on security issues? Yes, we are. We see in fact, I think our Secretary of Defense is going to Korea later this month. So I think we can do both.
So we are, the Korea and the United States, treaty allies, the strengthening very strong bilateral security, economic, and technical partnership over the years. And we do have strong institutional mechanisms we'll be able to further strengthen our bilateral relationship. But I hope they will leave these tariff negotiations behind in the near future, and we'll be able to more focus on the strengthening partnership in terms of as presented in our proposal of the manufacturing Renaissance partnership, more positive ends.
This is our last question right down here in the front.
Hi, my name is Won-Chul Kim with Hangyeol Daily in South Korea. I have one question. I think there is like a dilemma situation. Like August 1st is obvious the deadline, but additional tariffs like the sectoral tariffs on semiconductors are coming up. So does it make sense to finalize a deal before all the details are coming up? Because some experts in Korea say we shouldn't rush. So yeah, what is your take?
Well, I understand the point about not wanting to rush. rush, but once these tariffs are in effect, it has an impact on your company. Steel right now, Korean firms are getting hit with 50% tariffs. Autos, you're getting hit with tariffs already. So, and in the trade world, we have a saying, nothing is done until everything's done. But that old opus has been ripped to shreds by President Trump. So I think my advice to my Korean friends is make as much progress as you can, whenever you can, and keep moving. Again, I think we're not going back to the way it was before. Let's be frank, the U.S. is in violation of many of all of our trade agreements. We are in violation of the KORUS FTA, but we've applied these new tariffs that, violate the agreement we made. But that's the world we live in now. So again, I think from my perspective, we want to minimize the damage and try to find opportunities to where, again, with South Korea having skills that the U.S. wants, President Trump has been clear about the shipbuilding, helping us with our manufacturing renaissance. The U.S., we're horrible at shipbuilding. Who's really good? The Chinese. Who's better? South Korea. South Korea helps us. Let's work together. Let's keep finding those areas where it's complementary for both countries, would be my hope.
So, of course, relief from Section 232 sectoral tariffs are just as important as the reciprocal tariff relief for Korea, because over the half of our export to the United States could be affected by the current and potential future sectoral tariffs, with semiconductors, pharmaceuticals being considered in addition to the steel and aluminum, auto, and other parts. That's why throughout the negotiations, we've been seeking exemptions or relief on steel and aluminum, auto, and auto parts, as well as preferential treatment in the future Section 232 applications. Most recently, following President Trump's letter dated July 7th, when Trade Minister Yeo met with Secretary Lutnick, he reiterated that any agreements must include meaningful relief from Section 232 tariffs, and emphasized that Korea must not be placed at a disadvantage relative to competing economies in the application of Section 232 sectoral tariffs. So that's the question you presented. It's being considered in negotiations.
I want to reiterate that it's so frustrating to me that South Korea is already doing what Trump wants. Trump wants more investment in the U.S. Hyundai, $21 billion? He made, Chung Wee-sun was in the White House 3 days before Trump made the big announcement of 25% tariffs on everybody, with no recognition that our treaty, our mutual defense treaty ally, our Korea, high standard comprehensive free trade partner, they're treated the same as everybody else. They should get some special recognition for what they're already doing. They're already buying $32 billion of Boeing planes with GE engines. Why are we punishing Korea? I don't get it.
So I have one layman's question,
Please.
very specific to ask on that, because earlier on, I think maybe Wendy mentioned that the USMCA was providing some shielding in some areas of trade with Mexico and Canada. But it sounds like KORUS has completely been ignored. Are there ways in which KORUS can or does provide shielding in any of these areas?
Not to my knowledge. And the shielding that Mexico and the USMCA is providing is only regarding the auto rules. Actually, no, in one of the many iterations where Trump threatened more tariffs on Canada and Mexico, there was an agreement that products made that met the USMCA rules of origin would not be get the higher tariffs applied. To my knowledge, there's been no recognition or dispensation about KORUS at all. In fact, I'm convinced that some of our senior leaders in the U.S. are not even aware that we have a free trade agreement with South Korea.
You want to add anything? Well, I want to conclude the program. I'm sure that we're going to come back to discuss an actual deal when it comes, or maybe we'll have several programs depending on how this develops, a framework program and then a subsequent program. So please join me in thanking our panelists with a round of applause. And thank you for joining us today at KEI. Meeting is adjourned.